Well, good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour à tous. Je suis Charlie Angus, député de Timmins. Je vous remercie pour votre participation à cette assemblée virtuelle. Aujourd'hui, c'est très important de euh, travailler ensemble pour protéger le rôle de Laurentian. C'est une institution vitale pour notre région et pour tout le Nord. I'm Charlie Angus. I'm just going to say a few words off the top. We want to update you on what we're doing. This is a very, very stressful time for everyone, and we know that we're waiting on the next uh, announcement of CCAA. But we're also here to say that this fight's far from over, and we're working, at the provincial level, at the federal level, on a number of angles. I want to say that my colleague Alexandre Bouleris has pushed to get a study of what's happening at Laurentian at the Official Languages Committee. That's an enormous tool that we can bring forward. My colleague Lindsay Matheson, who deals with women's issues and post-secondary, is very much involved in this. We know, and I'm going to give you just one example of the kind of vandalism that's taken place against Sudbury students. We have 33 midwifery students that are beginning their placements. They're supposed to begin their placements on May 3rd. They can't continue because there's no program to give them insurance. They're being forced to relocate. They can't relocate to get loans to even relocate because there's no Laurentian that can sign off for them. They need the letters of enrollment, which Laurentian cannot provide. This is the kind of complete abdication of responsibility that was allowed to happen, not just in midwifery, but in so many programs. So my colleague Lindsay Matheson is working and is going to take up the fight for the midwifery students. I just want to say that when you hear from your Sudbury MP not to expect any kind of check and to trust him that there's going to be a private members bill somewhere down the road to help someone else in some other situation, that's not good enough. We put 60 years into this university. This university reflects the Indigenous, francophone, and working class realities of all our northern communities. We are invested in Laurentian. We are not letting it go. We are holding the government's feet to the fire every day, and you can damn well be assured that we're going to make sure the Trudeau government comes to the table to save Laurentian, to work with you to get us through this time. And I'm going to end by saying that your public actions are being noticed. What was done by CCAA in the first round was done in the darkness. It was done without scrutiny. Well, now they're being scrutinized, and they know that we're watching, and we're going to continue to watch, and we're going to continue to fight. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Carol Hughes right now, and then we're going to sort of walk you through some of the steps we've been all taking, and then we really, really want to hear from you as we talk about charting a path forward. So over to you, Carol Hughes.
Ani, bonjour. Merci, Charlie. I tell you, certainly there's been a lot going on, and the NDP have been very active in the House of Commons. Just on Friday, my colleague Scott Duval was debating a private members bill on pensions, and he raised the plight of the Laurentian University. Alors, on sait que ça fait pendant des générations que l'Université de Laurentienne a été un cœur battant pour Sudbury et pour le nord de l'Ontario. Et des générations de jeunes du nord de l'Ontario sont venus à Sudbury pour apprendre et bon nombre d'entre eux ont resté dans le nord ou ont emporté leurs compétences avec eux dans le nord ailleurs. Alors, c'est certain qu'il y a beaucoup de... Je sais qu'on partage vos préoccupations. Je peux vous dire que je vais confirmer ce que Charlie a dit au sujet du projet de loi de Paul Lefebvre. Il l'a déposé lundi, mais encore une fois, ça ne protège pas toutes les institutions publiques. Et puis, c'est très, très préoccupation. On est très préoccupé par ça. So we are concerned about the private members bill that was tabled because it doesn't cover hospitals. And we know that there are many other public institutions, and that CCAA wasn't meant for public institutions. And so, we really need the federal government to give Northern Ontario this lifeline and to stand up to protecting public education, public secondary education. They have a huge role to play, not only with the CCAA, but as well when it comes to Indigenous language and culture in post-secondary education, the reconciliation piece on that, as well as the francophone education. So on that note, I know that Jagmeet, our leader, is with us again, and we really appreciate the fact that he understands how important this piece of education is, this post-secondary education is to us. Laurentian University has also been tied to NOSM, and we've saw the challenges that NOSM may have with the with some funding that that Laurentian University has either misused or is holding on to. And so we need to make sure that all of those courses are protected and that those students are able to continue their education here in the North without too much more disturbance. So on that note, I'm going to pass it over to our leader, Jagmeet Singh.
Thanks so much, Carol, and a big thank you to Charlie and to you, Carol, for all the work you're doing, and to all the champions, advocates, our provincial colleagues, all the community organizers, students, everybody who's fighting. This is so important to the North. The more I hear stories about what Laurentian University means to the community, l'impact sur la communauté francophone, sur la communauté autochtone, c'est essentiel pour le nord de l'Ontario, pour Sudbury. So it's so important that we are coming together to fight, to keep the programs there, to keep this really vital institution going, to keep the jobs. The impact it has on Sudbury and the surrounding region and the entire North can't be underlined enough, can't be emphasized enough. And so we are here as your allies. I'm here as a leader of a national party that is fighting alongside you to keep this institution going, to support the families, the young people, Indigenous communities, francophones, all who depend on this so much. So we are here for you. And I want you to know that you can count on us, all of us, New Democrats from federal to provincial levels. I also want to say I've got the incredible and immense honor of introducing our next speaker, who is a giant, a legend, a homegrown Sudbury talent, who went on to be international president of Steelworkers, someone who has shown just incredible passion for justice and fairness, but specifically for Sudbury. He's been a champion to his hometown, hasn't let, and not surprisingly, let becoming a legend in any way take away from being grounded and being connected to the people. So with great honor, I introduce the next speaker, Leo Gerard. I feel like there's got to be a big applause for that, folks. This is the applause in the deaf community. It works really well on a Zoom. Leo, I hope you're seeing all the hands, the twinkle hands that are applause for you, Leo. Lots of love for you.
I can say that I'm the has been that never was. Anyhow, that I worked in 2 countries in our union for almost 50 years, 25 of them in the U.S. And unfortunately, my experiences have given me an opportunity to work on between 35 and 40, quote, CCAAs in 2 countries. We need to understand what's going on at Laurentian is not a CCAA, it's a hijacking. And one of the things that I've been encouraging people, who initiated the CCAA? Did it come from the Premier? Did it come from the bank? Did it come from the Senate at Laurentian University? I have not been able to get an answer to that, so that people should understand that this is not a traditional CCAA. This is whoever initiated it using this as a trial balloon. If they can do this to a public institution like Laurentian, they can do it other places. Our union, the Steelworkers Union, was part of the founding, as Charlie mentioned a while ago. More than 60 years ago, we founded Laurentian University, and our union played a big role in the community at the time, bringing people together so that Northern Ontario would have a legitimate university. And the reality is that the future of Northern Ontario in many ways rests with what happens in the university. 65% of the students that were at Laurentian University were from Northern Ontario. The programs that they went in are the programs that would lead to better jobs, including things like physics, mechanical engineering. The union helped create the Center for Occupational Health and Safety, the Research Center. We still have that going, but we're not sure how it'll get funded. We raised close to $500,000 for labor studies scholarships and scholarships on health and safety research at Laurentian. We don't know if that money is going to be given back to us for the programs. So this is a tremendous opportunity for the community to come together and fight like we did 60 years ago to make sure that Laurentian University survives, but not just survives, thrives. The future of Northern Ontario in many ways has been benefiting over the years because Laurentian University. I have two nephews that graduated at mechanical engineering from Laurentian. You know what? They didn't want to go to Windsor. They didn't want to go to somewhere else. They wanted to stay and work in Sudbury. And they're both working here. And without that, we'd never have that. So I know that there's a lot of speakers, and I think that it's very, very important that in the leadership of our party, the NDP, we get to the bottom of who initiated this under what circumstances. And if it's the premier, if it's the banks, if it's the prime minister, if they've colluded together to put the grad students in this kind of a predicament, whether it's wifery or whether it's occupational health and safety research, dismantling those programs is a bad, bad blow to Northern Ontario. So I'll turn it back to whoever was chairing and tell you that I never left Sudbury. My body might have been someone else, but my heart was always here. And Sudbury is one of the great places. I used to tell people, stay the hell out of my hometown. There's 300 lakes within the city limits, and we've polluted enough of them that we can now swim in the clean ones. Well, I'll turn it back to whoever is chairing, and Jagmeet, thanks very much for participating. Your participation means a lot to our people, and it'll mean a lot to Northern Ontario. And we got two great MPs for provincially. We're going to get two more federally next round.
That's right, brother. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Leo. Everyone appreciated your comments so much. I could see lots of smiles, lots of positivity, lots of good comments. And back to you, Charlie.
Yes, thank you, Leo. It's a real, you give a lot of people hope because you know you've been through the ringer with CCAA, and we all know something is terribly wrong here, and we are going to stay focused on this. I really want to turn it over to our provincial colleagues who've been on the front line dealing with Doug Ford and the idiocy that created this in the first place. So I think we're going to start with Franz. Are you going to go first? No, Jamie West. I'd like to have Jamie speak first, and then we'll go to Franz. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Charlie. Bonjour tout le monde. Je m'appelle Jamie West. Je suis le député provincial de Sudbury. It's an honor to follow Leo Gerard. One of the reasons I became an MPP is because I was able to go in the leadership program that the Steelworkers had, and I was one of the first groups of people to go in the international leadership program. But I'll tell you, my path to become an MPP really had a lot to do with Laurentian University. I grew up in geared income housing, and my ability to go to a post-secondary school in the city I lived in is essential, and we need that opportunity for future kids. So not only am I a grad, but my wife is a grad of the French BED program, and both of my sons are current students at Laurentian. What's happened in our city is devastating. We were in touch with the minister in June and July of this year. We didn't know how deeply in debt Laurentian was, but we were trying to help the Laurentian. We were completely ignored by the minister for all of those months. He's recently announced that he knew for at least 6 months that Laurentian had difficulties with finances. We're into this CCA process. The outcomes have been devastating for our community. And Leo and Charlie and others have talked about them with midwifery, with the loss of physics and math, economics, engineering, and none of this really makes any sense. And so we're going to do what we've always done in Sudbury, is fight back and demand fairness. We've been told for generations from successive conservative and liberal governments that things are not possible. We were told we wouldn't have a cancer center. We were told that we wouldn't have a center for research on occupational safety and health. We were told we wouldn't have a indie cinema. We were told that we weren't going to have a PET scanner, and all of those things our community fought for and got. Very briefly, some of the work that we've done in the last little while. Last week, I spoke about Laurentian University and the problems of Laurentian University during question period and other times on 5 different occasions. We've had town halls. We had a town hall in March. We've had press conferences. We're having another press conference on Monday to demand that the minister take action and stop the process. And let's work as a community and find real outcomes for this and not this clearinghouse. Just in closing, before I hand off to my colleague, Franz Jelena, who's been an excellent mentor for me, I just want to thank everyone from the NDP for being front and center on this. You know, Charlie, Angus, called for an emergency debate and forced an emergency debate that lasted till midnight last week. And that takes real leadership. Jagmeet has been all over this. He's been in our community virtually, and I know he'd be here in person because I've been out at Tuco's Tacos with Jagmeet in Sudbury, fighting for the city and talking about how important Sudbury is in the past. And if it wasn't for the pandemic, he'd be in person. Carol Hughes, successive federal NDP members fighting for my city, which makes me so proud. And of course, my own colleagues, Andrea Horvath has been talking about the importance of Laurentian University and protecting it. We recently had conversations with Guy Bourgoin, who's our francophone critic, Saul Mamakwa, our Indigenous critic, and Laura Melindo, who's our colleges and universities critic. And just last week, MPP Jennifer French, MPP Peggy Sattler were talking about Laurentian University at Queen's Park, this week, because of COVID-19, we're on different cohorts and opposite shifts. And so that voice is always there for you from the NDP about Laurentian University and fighting for Sudbury. And I'm going to hand it off now to one of the probably strongest voices for the NDP provincially, and that'd be my colleague and good friend, MPP France Jelena. France?
Well, thank you, Jamie, and thank you to all my colleagues for being here this afternoon. What is happening at Laurentian University is a catastrophe. We cannot let this process continue. We have to stay united, speak with one voice, and ask that this process be stopped. Ask for a moratorium to give the people of Sudbury a look at what the situation really is, and let us bring forward solutions that make sense to us. We have to have a voice. Whether we look at Laurentian University as a whole, the 69 programs that have been cut, those are just what has been announced. As soon as you peel the onions a little bit, you realize that it's not 10% of the students that have been affected, it's 100% of the students at Laurentian that have been affected by those cuts. Whether you look at Indigenous studies, when Laurentian decided to do away with their federated university, that means U Sudbury, that has the best Indigenous study program that was developed by Indigenous people. They have the teachers, they have the elders, they have the knowledge keepers who really make sure that we have strong programming. All of them have been laid off. They're gone. And now Laurentian is supposed to pick up 5 or 6 of those programs for the month of May. Does anybody heard about colonialism before? Have we heard about the Truth and Reconciliation and what we should do and what we should not do? And du côté des francophones, les francophones se sont ralliés et ont dit à l'Université Laurentienne, vous ne nous représentez plus. On veut une université pour et par et avec. Et ça se passe avec l'Université de Sudbury. And then, as if things were not complex enough, we got a new omnibus bill at Queen's Park that says NOMS, or Northern Ontario School of Medicine, will become independent, won't be affiliated with Laurentian. Plus, Laurentian has spent a lot of effort bringing international students to our community, and now all of them are left without support. We can change this. We have the knowledge, we have the skills, we have what it takes. Sudbury is not afraid to take out mountains and win. We did the regreening, we did the snow lab. There are lots of very knowledgeable, talented, and hardworking people here. We will overcome this if we stick together, we speak with one voice. And today we want to hear your voice to make sure that we're all in this together. Merci. Thank you. Chimiwach.
Merci Franz pour votre discours. Maintenant, je voudrais inviter l'audience de participer. C'est clair, il y a beaucoup des dossiers et enjeux qui étaient affectés par les décisions de Laurentian maintenant. So I'm going to ask you, because we know it's affecting Francophone, international, the arts, the music program, so many areas that have just been devastated. So if you have questions, if you could start putting them in the chat box, and then we're going to start to try and bring them to people who can answer them for you. But I'd like to start off by inviting Caitlin Cotilla to share her experience as a Laurentian student, because this is about the students. This is about your future. So let's listen to Caitlin, and then we will take the questions from other people.
Thank you so much, Charlie, and thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak. My name is Caitlin Cotilla, she, her pronouns, and I'm currently a fourth-year student at Laurentian University, where I was double majoring in political science and communication studies. I entered this semester with 2 majors that I was very proud to be a student of, and I'm leaving this semester with not a single program under my belt. With no idea what my future holds, all of my faculty and professors have been terminated, my programs are no more, and I don't really know what I'm going to be doing moving forward. Since the announcement, I've had a little bit of time to look into what the path forward looks like for me, and I have reached out to a number of universities in Ontario only to be rejected before even being told what the application process looks like. Because I am in my 4th year, residency rules are a thing, and I've done too much of my degree at Laurentian for them to accept me now. With only 1 year left of my degree, I don't know what I'm going to do. I am being given some makeshift options at best from Laurentian University, where they're telling me that I can potentially take online courses elsewhere to count towards a Laurentian degree to then get transferred here and there in the most confusing way possible. And all of this is happening while me not knowing and being able to trust that Laurentian University is going to be able to stay open long enough for me to be able to obtain this degree. And so I'm going into the fall stressed and overwhelmed, but I am not alone. And I am not the only student who is feeling this way. Many of the students who are affected by these cuts have been banding together to stand in solidarity, to support each other, and to help each other through this incredibly stressful time. And I've had the opportunity to speak to students from all over, from all different backgrounds, and we all don't know what we're going to do. I don't think I mentioned, I'm originally from Sudbury. I was born and raised, and I've lived here my whole life. Laurentian to me has always meant that I could afford to get a post-secondary education and I could afford to have a degree. Laurentian University is a home to so many people that many have worked so hard to build for our community that through the CCAA process and through these cuts has been destroyed. And so I and so many people in our community want to see this fixed, and we want to see the Laurentian that we fought so hard for, and the Sudbury and Northern Ontario communities that we fought so hard for, be revived to the thriving spaces and thriving cultural hubs that they once were before the CCAA process. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that. Wow. Every story that we're hearing just shows the complete scandalous negligence that allowed this process to literally hijack what could have been a discussion about restructuring and getting financing in place, and we have to stay on that. I have a number of questions coming in, and we're not going to be able to get to all of them, but I wanted to pass one on to you, Jagmeet, because you're at the federal level on this, and it's from Tasha Beads about the detrimental impact on the Indigenous program and the students, the fact that this university had a tricultural mandate, and that was to create a space for Indigenous learning and Indigenous students to create where they wanted to develop a proper system that spoke to in their culture and within their rights. And she asked, what does this mean about truth and reconciliation? And we know certainly call to action 16 was about, in the truth and reconciliation, was about the importance of post-secondary. So I'd like to turn that over to you, Jagmeet.
Thanks so much, Charlie. And France mentioned this as well. I mean, it's so clear what Laurentian University means is something really unique and really special. The combination of having a space, an institution dedicated to higher learning, specifically one of the best programs around Indigenous learning, and one that was founded with the input of traditional knowledge keepers and elders, the quality of that experience and the indigenization of the institution, we could see it as a really special place, combining that as well as being a space for Francophonie and a space for the North, created something really special and really unique, and really also highlights why the federal government has to play a role here. We can't just let the federal government sit by idly when an institution that directly would impact the improved quality of life for Indigenous people directly is access for francophone communities. C'est essentiel. Ça souligne l'importance pour le gouvernement fédéral d'agir de maintenant pour sauver les programmes. So it's so important, and why I take my role really seriously, that we've got to protect this institution for what it brings and what the special thing they were building around creating that tri-community element, that tri-culture. It is very special and something we've got to defend.
Thanks. Ginny McFarland is written. I don't know if people had a chance to read her statement, but I think it speaks to so much of our experience in the North. I know so many people who have no opportunity to go down south. It's possible to go to Laurentian, but to go further south is very difficult. And Ginny McFarland writes that she's worried about the cuts to arts, mathematics, physics. The ability to have a proper master's program is actually about de-skilling the North. That where we had an institution that, again, working class people could get skills, highly trained, and then work in the field in the North, that we're now going to have to be relying on people with graduate degrees from elsewhere because of this happening. Franz, I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that, given the how many people come into Sudbury from across the North to get educated and then continue to work in the North.
It doesn't matter which community agencies that you look at, you will find either on their boards, either in their staff, graduate of Laurentian University. I'm a graduate of Laurentian, so is Jamie, so is so many people in and across. If you look, we have a mining center of excellence in Sudbury. Every single one of those business, and there are hundreds, have graduate from Laurentian University of programs that are at risk of not existing anymore. They have been identified as being cut. I refuse to use that language. We will fight back. We will make sure that we ask for a moratorium so that those students are allowed to finish their studies. It is inhuman to say 2 weeks before your final exam that your entire life path has been changed because of a process that doesn't take into account the voice of Northerners. So the importance of Laurentian is for every single not-for-profit agency, mining agency, whether you look in healthcare. Most of the nurses in Sudbury graduated from Laurentian University. They had a really strong partnership with Boreal. All of this is gone, or they say that all of this will be gone. I cannot accept this. I will not accept that. If we want the North to be able to continue to flourish, we need to have access to the knowledge that is taught at Laurentian, and the gutting of those programs will mean that none of that will be available to us, the people of the North, anymore. I can't accept that.
Well, Leo, I want to pass a question on to you from Paul Fraser. He says that he thinks Laurentian is the first step, that the government is also actively attacking public education, pushing private school business, pushing online learning without proper preparation, and that this whole push for privatization is something that they're using the CCAA. And I want to augment that with, we heard on radio the other day, somebody whose job it is to go in and carve up assets said, hey, don't blame CCAA. It's actually a really good way to deal with a crisis like Laurentian. What do you think, Leo, in terms of the decision to use CCAA in targeting a university? And we're seeing the devastating impacts, but what kind of precedent does this set that we have to stop?
I believe fundamentally that why I raised the issue about finding out who initiated this in that comment I made. I believe fundamentally that this is a trial balloon. If they can get away with this, they're going to do it in other public institutions. And again, from an institutional point of view of the steelworkers, people may not know this. We're the largest union at the U of T. We have over 7,000 members at the U of T. We have members at Queens. We have members in Guelph. So we have a lot of members in BC as well in public education, and no one consulted with us. None of those people at Laurentian consulted with us. And the fact of the matter is that it's hard to fathom that this would happen in Sudbury. But the union that represents faculty workers was told that if they didn't have this, the forced agreement down their throat, if they didn't have it by 10 o'clock, they were going to close the university. That's not how you treat people. And then if you look at what we're talking about, Charlie, the point that you raised about the North and the part that France raised, most of the courses that were cut are in many ways intermediate courses, like the young lady who just spoke. They're in the middle of their program and they can't get to finish it. And even if they are told that there's going to be a program, they don't know what it's going to be. And so you asked me, what do I think? I've done CCAA type stuff in 2 countries, and I've never seen anything in such secrecy, such lack of consultation. Even the most worst of employers that we had in the private sector that went CCAA, like Algoma Steel or like Stelco, it was always done with the seat at the table for the workers. And who is going to be on the creditors committee as this thing moves forward? We need to first win the fight for it not to move forward, but simultaneously, we've got to fight for a seat at the table for the workers at Laurentian University, because the workers and the students and the administration of the union, of the staff, are the key to the future. And the NDP in Northern Ontario is running with this, and they know what's at stake. But Charlie, I think that this is a trial balloon, and we need to fight like hell. And in the end, someone has to pay a political price for this. I imagine Ford is no better at higher education than he was at virus.
Yes, I think you're right. I think we're going to put as a flag for our to-do list, and we're going to get back to people on this about the fight to get a seat at the table. I think that we were not given that because this was a secretive process, and I didn't think any of us expected that this process would be the hatchet job it was. We have to now strategize to get a seat at the table to make sure that we have a voice when this thing is going forward. So we're going to be coming back to all you folks about that. And that leads me into my next question from Jennifer, who wants to know, well, what can actually be done? It is not possible for political parties to interfere with the court proceedings. And we know that I think April 30th is when we're getting the next decision coming down from CCAA. She wants to know if there will be a public inquiry into the financial mismanagement. I think that that's something that our provincial people can certainly look into. But Jagmeet, we're asking people to come out on a Saturday. People want to know, what can we do? So how do you see us moving forward in terms of doing a brass tacks campaign to make sure that we have a seat at the table, that our voices are heard, and we stop this destruction of this institution?
Thanks, Charlie. I really appreciate that, and it's exactly what we need to do. We are going to, at the federal level, really start to ramp up the pressure, and we've got a campaign. We're going to put it into the chat box, and it's add your name. Hopefully, you can take the campaign and share it with your friends. We want to get as many people as possible signing onto this campaign to ramp up the pressure at the federal level to say this is something the North wants, this is something that the people of the community want, and that we need to protect Laurentian University. And that we cannot let the federal government stand by idly. Lee was mentioning that Doug Ford does not seem to be good at dealing with a virus. He has been a train wreck and a disaster when it's come to dealing with COVID-19. And it's not surprising that his government is also a train wreck and a disaster when it comes to dealing with an institution like Laurentian. It should have never got to this, but this is where we are, and we cannot let things get worse. And we have to save Laurentian. We have to save the programs. We have to save what it means to the francophone community, Indigenous community, to young people to the North. We have to fight back. We're going to fight to make sure the federal government gets how important this is. Using bilingualism, if that's our way in, using Indigenous reconciliation, whatever we can, we want to push to see the federal government step in and provide some support immediately. When you've got a fire, you don't stand around with your arms crossed. You bring in the hoses and start putting out the fire. The federal government's got to step up. This is a disaster. This is a crisis. We can't afford to see the federal government wait and hum and haw. We need immediate action. So I invite everybody to join our online campaign to increase that pressure by adding your name and getting more people, as many people as possible. Reach out to friends that are francophone, reach out to Indigenous communities that you know that have seen the impact and the benefit of the Laurentian model and how good that is and how we want to expand on it, not lose those type of programs. Reach out to young people that can share their stories about how important this is to them and to their future. France and Jamie talked about how they personally went there. I know Charlie's got a really personal story about the impact of Laurentian University, and he shared with me, and it really, to me, just highlighted how important this institution is and how much it impacts people in so many different ways. So we want to hear your stories, and we also want to see you sign up to support this movement so we can put that pressure on the federal government.
Oh, thank you so much, Jagmeet. And we did have a question as well about how is this fight going to be waged at Queen's Park? So Jamie West, over to you.
Yeah, just give me a moment to unmute. So the push at Queen's Park has been happening since we found out about the CCA process. And the reality is Minister Romano has gone into hiding. We have called for his resignation or for Ford to fire him for his either lack of action or the direction he brought Laurentian into. This is an opportunity for the minister to show leadership, though. He can pause or put a moratorium on CCAA. I don't think the outcomes of what's happening here is what he expected. If he was even, you know, he might have been asleep at the switch, but what should have happened at Laurentian University shouldn't be canceling programs like engineering, midwifery, Indigenous studies, francophone programs. It shouldn't be this complete dismantling and hobbling of a university. And so our pressure right now is on calling for the minister to be successful. I think I might have lost my camera. Calling for the minister to help Laurentian be successful and put pressure on them. You have to recognize as well, one of the reasons we're in this situation is because provincially, Ontario funds universities and colleges at the lowest level across Canada. And I mean like lowest by a long shot, not slightly low, lowest by a long shot. We just spent about 2 weeks debating if the maximum political donations should be doubled in the middle of a COVID-19 pandemic. If the government can put that much focus on filling their pockets with money, then maybe what they can do is get to the middle of the pack when it comes to funding our post-secondary education. As well, I'm hoping that with the assistance of Jagmeet and his team at the federal level, they can put pressure at Trudeau to provide some emergency funding like they did to help out the Francophone University in Toronto so that Laurentian can be successful as well. France?
So much of what is being cut makes no sense whatsoever. So we'll focus on midwifery. It is the Ministry of Health that pays for the midwifery program at Laurentian. It's not going to make one iota of difference on their budget at the end of the day because the program is funded by a different government. And when they say, oh, there's not enough students, we have the maximum students that the government is willing to pay for. If you give us one more spot, there will be 100, mainly women, who will apply for that one spot. So the arguments that they use makes no sense. We need those midwives, we need the health promoters, we need the nurses, we need the people who do cancer treatment. All of those are being canceled. And to say that, oh, they exist in Toronto, they exist down south, Northerners deserve equity of access to university education. We have a right to be educated, to have a university education in Northern Ontario, everywhere in Ontario. I want equity. I see the cliff. We will fall off the cliff on April 30th. I want a moratorium so that give this back to the North and we will find solutions that make sense to us. You cannot make that important of decisions behind our back and let us live with this. This is not acceptable. We need a say, and that means a moratorium on those decisions till people of the North put their heads together and find the solutions forward that is respectful of the North, of Indigenous people, of Francophone people, and makes sense to us.
Thank you.
Charlie, can I intervene for just 30 seconds?
Absolutely.
We forgot, all of us, including me, I'm most guilty. Remember that Sudbury at Laurentian, because of the union and because of the NDP, we have a Living with Lakes program at Laurentian. Mm-hmm. Because Sudbury was one of the most polluted areas in Canada, if not the world, we fought for that environmental balance and living with lakes. We now, because of Laurentian's work on living with lakes, we've now got clean water in most of our lakes in the region. And so we need to bring the environmental movement into this fight as well, because they're going to get shortchanged. Sorry, I didn't want to take up time. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm going to turn to Carol because I know that our federal colleague, who's presently occupying the post in Sudbury but won't be occupying it much longer, and his colleague in Nickel Belt, who seems to have gone missing. If anyone sees Mark Seri, let us know. We're worried about him. We're not seeing him anywhere on this issue. But this idea that this is simply a provincial issue, and we know that the provinces fund education, but post-secondary has a huge federal component. And I remember when Doug Ford attacked the Francophone University in Toronto, we had a national response, just like we've had with Laurentian, and we forced the federal government to come to the table. I remember that. Carol, do you think that we're hearing from them, the government is certainly very, very aware of this situation at the federal level? Maybe if you could just explain a bit our fight in terms of the Francophone rights that we will be fighting to protect, and making sure the feds show up with a checkbook, regardless of what Paul Lefebvre says.
Sorry about that. So first of all, let's be clear. I mean, the private members bill doesn't proceed very quickly. It depends what number you have that you happen to have in the draw. So for example, I will never come up because my number is so far off in the draw. So and it would be better if the federal government had tabled something on this. Now, during the emergency debate that Charlie so rightly put forward, and there was much participation on, certainly there was some discussions there, and Mark Seri did do a speech on this here, but he said that they had been working with the university for the past 5 years. Well, if you've been working with the university for the past 5 years, how come there hasn't been any movement? Like, I think that's very problematic. Just waiting on the sideline is saying, okay, well, we'll just see what happens, as opposed to saying, let's be proactive and fixing this. Surtout sur la langue, sur les enjeux francophones, le gouvernement a un grand rôle à jouer et à protéger les programmes qui sont mis en place. On regarde au programme de sage-femme, qui est le seul programme au Canada. Et puis, ces étudiants-là ne peuvent même pas aller prendre leur stage en ce moment. Alors, et on dit qu'ils vont peut-être perdre leur crédit. Alors, le gouvernement a un grand rôle à jouer quand ça vient à protéger l'éducation francophone et tout ce qui entoure la francophonie au Canada. And same thing on the Indigenous side as well. And so I think that it's very problematic that there hasn't been any consultation before the Laurentian got to where it was to say, okay, here's what we need to do. No different for the individuals who were provided with pension decisions and said they had 3 days to decide if they wanted to take their pensions or not, without having an opportunity to really discuss this and say, okay, so what are my options with my advisor? They just didn't have that time. And so there is so much that went wrong with this process. The CCAA specifically excludes banks. It specifically mentions it. The private members bill that Paul has tabled only refers to post-secondary education. And let's be clear, there will likely be an election before any of that, like that private members bill moves forward. So we need to make sure and continue to put the pressure on the federal government and the provincial governments to take action now and save the education. The future of so many is at stake, not just for their well-being and not just for their where they're going to go in the future, but as well as for the economy of Sudbury and of Northern Ontario.
Well, thank you for that. We are going to start to move towards a wrap up. I was wondering if each of our participants could give a 1-minute explanation of the next steps of where they're going, to reassure you folks that we are staying on this. So Jamie, would you like to start?
Yeah, thank you, Charlie. So on Monday morning, Franz and I are having a press conference to highlight the health impacts of what's happening with these cuts. And the idea of this is to illustrate and demonstrate to the government, who should be aware of this, but also to the public, of how ridiculous the outcomes of the CCA process is. They pretended that this was about eliminating, under-enrolled classes and tightening the books. The midwifery program, as was discussed many times, is fully funded. It's maximum occupancy of 30 students, with 300 applicants every single year. It's ridiculous that this has been canceled, and it's detrimental that we're losing an essential service. 2 of my 3 children with midwives, and I'd recommend that to anybody to have a midwife. The nursing program as well has been crippled and hobbled. In the middle of a pandemic where we really value the need of medical heroes, you can't say healthcare hero in underfunded healthcare. And so we're going to keep up that pressure and move towards calling for a moratorium. And we know from Sudbury, we've done this since the beginning of time in Sudbury, that we gather together and we ensure that our facilities are successful. And that's our plan going forward, is call for the moratorium so that the CCA process doesn't proceed, so that we really use the tools we have to be successful long-term forward. Because if we follow this process, we're looking at $100 million yearly being lost from Sudbury. And that isn't something that any level of government can look the other way on.
Thank you. Franz?
Je suis d'accord avec qu'est-ce que Jamie vient de nous dire. Nous serons à Queen's Park la semaine prochaine. Je sais qu'il y a des gens qui sont inquiets. There's some people who want a forensic audit done. I will be writing to the Auditor General of a province so that she can have a look and make any wrongdoing public if there was any. In the meantime, ce qu'on veut vraiment faire, c'est de s'assurer que le processus en cours, peu importe ce que la Cour va dire, qu'on demande au gouvernement un moratoire, qu'on leur demande de s'assurer que le financement va être là, autant du fédéral que du provincial, pour que les gens de Sudbury puissent regarder la situation et mettre des solutions de l'avant qui sont respectueuses des francophones, des Premières Nations et de l'Université Laurentienne dans son ensemble, en n'oubliant pas ce qui se passe à l'École de médecine du Nord de l'Ontario. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you. Leo? Oh, got to turn that mic on. There we are.
I just said I agree with French and Jamie's comments, but I'm really hung up on the fact that I believe this is a trial balloon. It needs to be fought from every angle possible. And there needs to be more public exposure of the fact that this is not a traditional CCAA. There's something else going on. And the questions about doing a study about it. Who initiated the request for CCAA? Where did it come from? Did it come from the banks? Did it come from Ford? Did it come from the Senate at Laurentian, which I don't think? And that will give us a direction on what this government wants to do. And for everybody, I worry a lot about Northern Ontario, but I also worry a lot about public institutions, because if they find this as a way that they can gut programs and all we can do is yell and scream, they're going to gut programs everywhere, in healthcare, in higher education, in every area we can. So that's my deal. We got to fight like hell to know what's going on, and then we need to take action. And we can't. This has to have a political price.
Yeah, this will have a political price. Carol?
Sorry about that. No, so I don't know what else to say. I think that, our hearts and our thoughts are with those who are affected right now. I don't think that there has been a day in the House right now since the last couple of weeks that we haven't mentioned the plight of Laurentian University, the students and the workers there, and what has been going on. And we're going to continue to push on that. I know Jagmeet and I and a few others wrote to the minister. So we're going to continue to push. And, we're also taking the lead from you who have been affected. I know that we're starting to we have been receiving a lot of correspondence, and we're trying to get through it as much as we can, as fast as we can. And again, solidarity with you. Keep up the fight, and we're there. And we just need to make sure that the governments of the day are take their responsibilities and act on them.
Well, thank you. Before I turn it over to Jagmeet, I read one story in the chat about from a midwifery student. We're talking lots about midwifery today, but she was told that this decision would not negatively impact her education. But Laurentian University called a meeting during her class time and fired her professor. That shows that they didn't give a shit about our people. And when I see stuff like that, I say, that's not good enough for me. We did not get into politics as New Democrats to go along, to get along. We came into politics to stand up, to fight for injustice. And this is some of the worst injustice I've seen, because we're seeing students with massive levels of student debt who put their faith in Laurentian, who were told that this was a university that had a future for them, and to have it hacked away on them like that in such a disrespectful manner, with professors who built programs being kicked out the door without even their severance. That's not going to go down on our watch. Maybe Paul Lefebvre and Mark Serre can say, well, it's a provincial decision. No, this is affecting all of us. So we know you are very, very upset. We know you are very frustrated, and we can't tell you that this is going to be easy. I would love to tell you that we can wave a magic wand and fix all this. That's not how change happens. Change happens through a lot of heartache, through a lot of stress, and bringing people out on a Saturday afternoon when they'd rather be anywhere else on the planet, but because it matters. And you're here because it matters, and we're here because it matters. And we're going to make sure that those other guys and gals who made this happen, as Leo said, they are going to pay a political price. And we are going to have a seat at the table when we decide the future of our university and our institution in Northern Ontario. And I want to thank Leo. It's an honor to have Leo here. He's like one of my big heroes from way back. Back when I had dark hair, and our provincial team, I just adore the work you guys do, but I really want to thank our leader Jagmeet Singh. As soon as he heard about Laurentian, he said, what do we do? How do we we brought the whole national caucus, forcing that national debate, bringing it up. The Liberals are feeling enormous heat, and Jagmeet's not letting this go. He calls me all the time on this and says, where are we going next? What do I need to know? So I want to turn it over to Jagmeet, and I want to thank everyone for coming today. I know this is really, really hard, but we are definitely in this together, and we do have your back. So over to Jagmeet. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. Just as Charlie was saying, thank you to everybody who's fighting for this. This means a lot to see how many people have come together. Our provincial team, you're amazing champions. Jamie, France, thank you so much. My team, Charlie and Carol and Alexander have been just nonstop, relentless. And Charlie gets. Charlie is relentless. He's a fighter, as we all are. Carol has been raising the stories, raising how this impacts people. Alexander's been taking the French language approach, the francophone approach. But I just want you to know that we have been hearing your stories. And to me, to hear young people talk about their futures being ripped away from them, to hear people talk about how this was supposed to be a place where they could feel secure in knowing that if they did the right thing, if they made the right choices, they could have a brighter future. And for students to feel the impact of this through no fault of their own, students are the ones that are hurting. Workers are hurting. Professors that gave everything to build great programs are hurting. That to me is so wrong, and why we need to stand up. And we are not going to let the Liberals get away with just saying, oh, it's not our jurisdiction. I always say a leader is someone who finds a solution, doesn't look for an excuse. And what we're seeing again and again with the Liberals is they look for excuses, they don't look for solutions. We are one of the world's largest economies. We can find solutions. The federal government can work within the existing frameworks. Of course, we've got to respect the Constitution and we've got to respect jurisdiction, but that is not an excuse not to act. That just is the reality that we work with, and we work with it every day. And when Liberals want to get stuff done, they get it done. When they want to get stuff done, they don't make the excuse of jurisdiction. It's only when they don't want to act. We're not going to let that happen. We are going to fight every step of the way to protect the North, to protect the francophone community, to protect Indigenous people, to protect young people, to protect everyone who deserves a bright future. We are going to fight for them. As Carol was saying, solidarity, we are with you. Solidarity every step of the way. Yeah. We're going to fight with you every step of the way. Thank you, friends. You can count on us.
Well, thank you, folks, for this. Merci, Miigwech, pour votre participation. This is this is our update, and we will update you as this fight continues. And we are going to keep on this. So take care. Thank you.
Good job, Charlie. Good job,
Thank you,
Charlie.
Leo. Thank you, Leo, so much.
And
Great
folks,
job.